You open your eyes to a gentle, drowsy light filtering through olive trees. Their leaves shimmer silver in the morning breeze, whispering stories no one has listened to in centuries. You are standing on a slope outside the modest village of somewhere around 300 BCE. This place isn't exactly Athens or Sparta. No, you're somewhere quieter, somewhere softer. The air smells faintly of thyme, damp earth, and something else faintly sweet. You don't know yet. Or as your neighbor calls it, a shell babysitter. He's just jealous because his goats keep climbing onto his roof. The ground beneath your sandals is still cool, dusty from the night. And you're here for snails. That's right. You, a perfectly average citizen of ancient Greece, modest tunic. Mild ambition are but they are picky. They prefer shady corners, moist soil, and soft leaves. Too much sun, and they vanish. Aristophanes joked about them in a play, and Pliny the Elder later on wrote that Greeks fattened snails with wine and bran. It's harvesting day. You crouch low your knees, complain and gently scoop a plump one from the stone. It retreats into its shell like it knows what's coming. You admire it for a second. You'll make someone's appetizer very slippery, you whisper. Yes, the snails of ancient Greece were on a diet richer than yours. Bees hum lazily by. Cicadas sing like broken flutes. You pick another snail and another. Slow work, meditative. A poor man's shimmer. You tried it once. It did not suit your complexion, not metaphorically, into cracks, into bushes, into philosophical oblivion. But the truth is, you don't know. Life may be slow, and look how well that's working for them. You squint, you sigh, you adjust the basket. It leaks, slightly snail. Juice is an occupational hazard. A rooster crows somewhere nearby. You pass stalls, selling olives, wine, tiny figurines of gods. You nod politely to a woman selling goat cheese. She nods back, still offended that you once called her cheese unsettled. But you believe in the slow, loving hand of cultivation. In your little farm, there's a snail named Dionysus. You set your basket down. Snails begin to stir, sensing something. You like to think they're excited. A woman with an embroidered shawl haggles aggressively, as if bargaining with fate itself. You let her win. You were going to give her a discount anyway. You pretend not to look, but you look. They do look like him. Claims snail slime soothes burns and balances the humors. You tell him it's mostly just slime. He nods solemnly, as if that confirms everything. Yes. Missing a tooth and has the eyes of someone who has seen too many bad decisions. You've never tried that, but you believe her. People here carry ancient truths in their pockets like lucky stones. You toss him a bit of bread. He stares at it like it owes him money. You hear two philosophers arguing about whether the soul has weight. One insists it does. The other insists it's roughly equal to the weight of an apricot. You side with apricot guy, reminding you that you too can move gently through time. He's enormous, probably 20 seasons old, and moves like a philosopher on a deadline. Nobody cooks Dionysus. He's a local celebrity. Richer folks see it as rustic charm. Ah, yes, escargots hellenica. Can I hold one? They ask. You nod, choosing a calm snail, probably named something philosophical like Pythagoras. Or maybe they just hate poetry hour, which is coming up soon in the square. You do too. It's always very... The child giggles when it climbs their finger. For a moment, you wonder if you should charge for the entertainment. You don't. Not today. You nod at him. He stares back, unrepentant. You tried to explain that escargot isn't Greek, and he blinked like you'd said. The moon was made of lentils. Slightly more tired than yesterday, but maybe a little wiser. Maybe you've been tending this slimy little empire for 5 years now. Some scrolls mention snail mucus as a cure for inflammation. They also believed in applying snail shells to prevent wrinkles. So technically, you're a skincare supplier. Add that to your resume. It started as a joke, a wedding gift from your cousin. Congratulations. May your love multiply like snails. It got out of hand? Not yours. Yours was taken by a fox last week. May Hermes guide its tiny soul. Maybe press that like button as softly as you'd press olive oil into warm bread. Subscribe if you enjoy history as soft as damp moss. And begin the walk to town, passing the same fig tree you pass every day. Remember the cracked vase by the rock? Still cracked. Still sitting there like it's pondering something. And tell us in the comments, where are you listening from? And what time is it there? You stretch. The day ahead will be slow, a little slippery, and mostly uneventful. You probably won't make it through this day without an append. That's perfectly fine. Before we continue, gently close your eyes unless they already weren't. Let your shoulders melt into the present. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. You walk down a stone path. The field ahead glistens faintly in the morning dew. But look closely not. All of it is dew. Some of it, wiggles, snails, hundreds of them. Some as small as a lentil, others the size of a fig. Your job is theoretically simple. Keep the snails alive, fat, and edible. In fact, one of the first documented cases of snail farming appears in this exact era. You carry a small wicker basket lined with wet leaves. Not all snails are treated equally. Children from the village visit sometimes to feed him lettuce and ask big questions. Like, do snails? No, they're snails. And can I have him as a pet? You always say no. Historians still debate whether the ancient Greeks truly domesticated snails or just encouraged wild ones to gather conveniently. As the sun rises higher, you begin to notice the subtle choreography of the day. And there it is. First weird tidbit of many. In some coastal villages, by midday, you've gathered enough to sell. You tie the basket shut with twine. You stop at the spring to rinse your hands. Cool water. And as you head into the dust and clamor of the market road, you smile to yourself. The road into Epidaurus is dry and bright. Sunlight bounces off the white stones and right into your eyes, like Apollo himself is playing tricks again. Market day is always the same. Smells of fried dough and fish guts. The sound of arguing bakers, and that one guy who plays the lyre like it personally insulted him. You find your usual corner, third stone pillar on the left. Selling snails isn't glamorous, but it's honest work. A local physician stops by. He's an odd one. Collects snails, not for eating. Here, S. Your major historical fact of the day. A child appears. Small, sticky, curious. You make 3 sales by mid-afternoon. Enough for barley, soap, and maybe a fig or 2. Nearby, a man shouts about carrots, shaped like the god Pan. The air grows heavier with heat. You take refuge behind your pillar, fanning yourself with a cabbage leaf. There's a dog sniffing at your basket now. An old woman passes and whispers, "If you leave a snail on your doorstep overnight, it brings dreams of the sea." Snails, ever sensitive, start retreating deeper into their shells. Historians still debate whether snail farming was an industry or a hobby in most Greek regions. Like knitting, but on your way out, you pass the same goat who headbutted your cousin last month. You leave the village behind. The road winds gently back toward your fields. The olive trees sway. A distant owl begins its evening monologue. And there it is, again that same quiet rhythm. Snails crawling slowly. Tonight, you'll release the snails back into their garden, pour a little wine for Dionysus. After all, in a world full of sprinting myths and warlike heroes, someone has to keep the snails company. And tonight, that someone is you. The twilight air smells like crushed herbs and tired stone. Crickets start there, hesitant chirping. Like a choir warming up before a performance. You feel like you did all right? they feel otherwise. Probably. This, your snail sanctuary. Not even the owl. You walk the familiar path home, basket lighter, sandals dustier. You watch them as they begin to stretch and slither, tracing glistening trails into the grass. The notes twist through the air, catching in the olive branches, dancing between your ears. You sit on a flat stone and let the evening settle in. The snails you didn't sell are still with you, huddled inside their portable houses, judging your sales skills in complete silence. You pause by the edge of your field, a modest patch of shaded land. You untie the basket and gently tip the snails back into their enclosure. They tumble out with the world's slowest enthusiasm. Somewhere in the distance, someone is playing aloe stubble pipe soft and meandering, like wind, part art, part science, part I was bored. You've learned a lot from these creatures. Mostly, how to accept that nothing goes to plan. You think it was therapy? For some of us, watching snails is the only thing that makes sense. You place 2 snails Ajax and Demeter hat the starting line. You whisper, no pressure. They don't flinch. Of course they don't. They're snails. Moths flutter around it, dancing their own erratic ballet. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks once, sharply, like punctuation. Then silence again. You keep a record of each snail's growth. How much they've eaten? Whether Dionysus tried to escape again? More than you believe in your neighbor's weather predictions. The stars emerge, not in a rush, but like ancient memories, returning one by one. You spot Orion, or maybe not. He always looks slightly different after a glass of wine. The sky is a pale bruise of color lavender, peach, and the softest blue. They're all here, including Dionysus, curled under a rock, like he's hiding from responsibility. A relatable snail. As you dig, your fingers uncover a broken amphora, shard with a faded patina swirl. You turn it over in your hand. This land is older than you. Older than snails. Not profitable, but necessary. The snail pens need fresh soil. The wooden boards need scrubbing. But your art is quiet. It glistens and leaves trails. You know, he says, you could have been a potter, or a baker, or even a priest. You think maybe that's why you've kept them? Not for trade, but for stillness. And the watering pots are clogged with something that might be old moss, or very tiny frogs. A bee pauses on your thumb. You don't move. It's a moment too small to disrupt. You stretch, hear something pop, and hope it was just your knee. She's waving something in the air. You walk to meet her. She pays you in herb sage, lavender, something unlabeled. You thank her and wonder, briefly, if snails really can treat sadness. A bird sings off-key in the fig tree. You hum along. And this is where your day changes. You think about how quiet this life is and how rich. For now. You rinse the leaves. You wash Dionysus with a wet cloth. The other snails peek from their shells, like they're judging your technique. Because tonight, you're trying something new, experimental, bold. You've built a snail obstacle course. Yes, children would cheer. Adults would bet wine. The losing snail was not punished unless being slightly embarrassed counts. A mixture of grape, rainwater, and mild regret. It's for my aunt. She believes snails cure melancholy, using small sticks, tiny gates, and a bit of twine. You've crafted a maze. But here's your weird cultural tidbit. In some rural parts of Greece, you watch as Demeter inches forward. Ajax does nothing. Classic Ajax. Probably contemplating destiny. You sip a little diluted wine from a cup made by your cousin. It's a bit lopsided. So is the wine. As the snails crawl through the tiny course, you reflect on the nature of patience. Scholars still debate whether snail farming was more of a domestic ritual or a commercial practice in ancient Greece. You take a small notebook, your own invention, stitched leather, and parchment tanned. Scribble today's events. You've even named one new recruit Kalia. She's small, but determined. You believe in her. Finally, you lie back on the grass. As your eyes drift closed, you think, not all heroes wear sandals. And with that sleepy, barely coherent thought, you let the night wash over you. You wake to a rooster who doesn't respect boundaries. It's barely dawn. The snails are still sleeping, or meditating. Hard to say. You quietly count them. You stand and brush the grass from your tunic. Today is cleaning day, not glamorous. You begin by gathering fresh soil from the shady grove nearby. Your neighbor appears, uninvited and unburdened by tact. He leans on the fence. You nod. But then, who would care for the emotionally complex snails? He never does. He walks away muttering something about wasted talent, as if talent must always be noisy or sculpted in marble. Today's historical gem. In some Greek households, snails were not just food, but considered symbols of domestic peace. Their slow presence reminded people to savor home life. You replace the soil, gently turning the earth. You pause to drink from your clay cup, and watch the morning unfold. A breeze moves through the olive trees. Suddenly, you hear a voice, faint, distant, calling your name. It's the herbalist from the village. "I need 10 of your fattest snails," she says. "For an ointment." You raise an eyebrow. You nod solemnly. You select the plumpest snails, place them in a jar with mint leaves. Historians still debate how seriously ancient medicine took these months. But anecdotal evidence is a powerful thing, especially when wrapped in lavender. By midday, your field smells like clean earth and wild herbs. The snails crawl lazily across fresh terrain. Your chores are finished. You think about tomorrow's market. You think about how Dionysus might need a new hiding rock, not in coins, but in something deeper, something slower. Like a snail's heartbeat, like sleep arriving at the edge of day. The heat of the afternoon settles like a lazy cat in your lap. You sit under your favorite olive tree, the one with a knot shaped like a confused owl, and you feel the ground breathe beneath you. The snails are quiet. You imagine them whispering to each other in some slimy dialect, gossiping about which leaf tastes better, or why Calliope always hogs the basil. Not for worship, though a quiet nod to Athena never hurts, but to deliver snails to the kitchen servants. A priest requested them for some ceremonial dish. You don't ask questions. You add sprigs of fennel and mint, so they smell like a dream. Presentation is everything. You just raise the price a little and smile mysteriously. Some records suggest they were considered a dish of moderation, neither extravagant nor poor. A kind of spiritual middle ground. Today, you're supposed to visit the temple precinct. You pack the snails carefully into a lidded basket with holes punched in. Airflow is key. Good, he says. We need more people who understand patience. One even claimed that a snail could outlive a lie. You don't know what that means, but it feels poetic. Then he sneezes into his toga and goes back to watching pigeons argue. You pause to look. A few children are playing out some tragedy with exaggerated moans and dramatic death spirals. They're terrible actors. You clap anyway. She has ink on her hands and smells faintly of beeswax. You pass a traveling bard sitting cross-legged by the road, strumming a lyre with half a string. He sings. She inspects the snails with the care of someone who's seen too many bad offerings. Yours pass. The walk to the temple takes you past the old amphitheater. Its steps are sun-bleached and cracked, yet still more stable than your cousin's marriage. Your feet lead you through a shaded alley where fig trees bend toward the path, offering fruit as if they're apologizing for being sticky. You whisper goodnight to Calliope. You close the small wooden gate to their enclosure, more to make yourself feel secure than to actually contain them. You're inclined to believe they were made up on the spot, probably just to get figs. You take one. It's warm from the sun, soft, and too ripe. You eat it anyway. The snails are waking again. Dionysus is already halfway up a stick, looking like he's climbing Olympus. You cheer him on under your breath. You sit cross-legged beneath the same confused owl tree, and let the flavors remind you that life dosing tea needs spices to be good. The back wall of the enclosure is crumbling again, too much rain, or maybe one of the village boys leaned on it trying to borrow a snail. You told him they weren't free-range myths. He didn't laugh. And there it is, today's historical fact. The Greeks did, in fact, eat snails at sacred feasts, often marinated in vinegar and herbs. At the temple gate, a servant greets you with a tired smile. Your hands are soon covered in muck, your tunic decorated with abstract earth art. But the process is calming. A rhythm forms. Scoop, press, pat, sigh. You spot a cluster beneath a lettuce leaf. A new generation. You grin like a proud parent. She presses a small coin into your hand. Not much, but the gods aren't exactly overpaying these days. You can't name them all, but you pretend anyway. That one's the snail of eternal return. That one. The olive of indecision. Each one a little different one, shaped like a crescent moon, one like a fish, a lump. You see Calliope, dragging a leaf 3 times her size, like she's conquering her own Troy. He flops onto the grass with the sigh of someone who's seen too much mediocre poetry. You scratch behind his ears. He tolerates it. Barely. You like to think of them as tiny, squishy philosophers who've solved at least one identity crisis. You thank her. Bow slightly to the marble statue of Demeter in the courtyard, and back away like you've just remembered you're not that religious. You wonder if snails care about luck? They make their own paths. As you turn to leave, an old man on a bench squints at you. That S. Your obscure tidbit for the day. Some philosophers used snails as metaphors in lectures about time, movement, and the futility of haste. You look out over your little field and see the snails still resting beneath overturned pots and clusters of mint. Snails are nocturnal, after all. You've always liked that about them. It gives you a reason to stay up late without guilt. On your way home, the wind picks up a little, lifting your hair and carrying with it the scent of honey. You rise. Not quickly, never quickly, and rub the sleep from your eyes. Oh snail, oh snail, with house on back. You need no rent. You pay no tax. You teach us all to move not fast and still arrive with soul intact. You toss him a fig and keep walking. Historians still debate whether bard songs like that were improvised or inherited. Back in your grove, the shadows have grown long. You water the herbs, and as night returns and the stars begin peeking out again, you feel a strange kind of peace. Not excitement, not ambition, just quiet. Like maybe the world is still spinning, but at a slower, kinder pace. Morning again. The kind of morning that smells like wet stone and distant honey cakes. Today, the sky feels stretched, pale as linen. Breakfast is a flat round of barley bread and a cube of goat cheese, served on your favorite chipped plate. Today is repair day. You mix a fresh batch of mud and straw, patching the wall slowly. And here's your scholarly uncertainty for the day. Some believe ancient snail farmers used, while others argue they simply herded them into shaded corners. While the wall dries, you check on the eggs. Yes, snail. Eggs. Tiny, round, almost translucent. Fun fact: snails are hermaphrodites. Every snail you own is both mother and father. As you wash your hands, the dog from the village appears again. You spend the afternoon crafting new feeding dishes out of broken pottery. And there's your obscure tidbit. In some parts of the ancient world, particularly in Euboea, broken pottery was considered good luck if repurposed in a garden. The dog leaves, unimpressed. The breeze returns, whispering through the trees. You lie on your back, arms folded behind your head, and stare at the emerging constellations. You close your eyes. The earth is soft. The wind is kind. And everything else can wait. You wake to a drizzle soft, playful, the kind that taps on leaves like it's asking politely to The wind is gentle tonight. It brushes through the tall grass like an old friend leaning in to whisper secrets from a colder time. You stand at the edge of a fjord, the sky above stretched in watercolor layers of twilight-faded blue melting into the sleepiest gray. There's the distant cry of a seabird, lonely and half-hearted, like it forgot what it was squawking about halfway through. Norway, probably. Or Denmark. Honestly, no one is entirely sure which coastline this is. The lines on the map back then were more like vague suggestions than hard borders. If you like drifting into the past, if historical tangents soothe your modern nerves, gently press that like button. Maybe even subscribe. We're always wandering into weirder centuries. But that's the beauty of it. You don't need GPS to get cozy by a Viking hearth. Your boots crunch softly against the damp earth. Somewhere behind you, a small cluster of Viking longhouses creaks in the breeze. Thin smoke trails slip from their turf-covered roofs, vanishing into the falling night. You're not alone, but you may as well be nobody. Here is in a hurry. Least of all you, or possessed by wind spirits. Depending on who you ask, and how loud the goats are bleating that day. Fish for energy. Fish for fever. Fish. Fermented herring that has been buried for 3 weeks in a wooden barrel sealed with moss and animal fat. If your body was cold, you needed hot things. Onion stew, fire-heated mead, or a full-body sweat bath inside a smokehouse that smelled suspiciously like roasted mutton. She calls it surströmming. You call it an insult to the gods. Tonight, you've slipped quietly into the 9th century. The healer hums as she pours water over heated stones. You're still sick, but you don't care. There's a sleepy sort of peace in knowing nobody else has it figured out either. The room fills with hissing clouds, and your nose fills with herring and pine resin. Somewhere in this murky sauna, your fever either breaks or gets politely ignored. Before we dig into the rich, strange, occasionally pungent world of Viking medicine and cuisine, let's whisper a small, sleepy reminder. And while your eyes grow heavier, tell us, where are you listening from? And what time is it there? You do not want to know how they harvested it. Now, let's ease into tonight's journey. You're hungry, but not in the usual way. One bite, and you feel your humors abandoning ship. Your stomach churns. Your forehead glistens with a fever that's been lingering since yesterday's storm. You'd blame the undercooked lamb if you hadn't watched your neighbor Einor sneeze directly into the communal stew pot. The healer well. She says, she's a healer takes. One look at you. This, she insists, will balance your humors. Here's the thing about Viking medicine. It wasn't big on subtlety. You're either fine or cursed. But food was medicine. Garlic, onions, leek salt, crushed into pastes. They believed in hot and cold illnesses borrowed from Greek medical theory, by way of some very confused monks. First the fish, then the steam. Historians still debate whether these saunas were used more for health or for hiding from the in-laws. Possibly both. Odd fact of the night. Some Vikings used bear bile as a laxative. You lie back on the wooden bench. The warmth presses into your bones. You probably won't make it through this day. But don't worry, that's just how Viking Tuesdays go. The morning comes reluctantly, like a tired ox, dragging a cart through slush. You don't so much wake up as regain awareness through steam and regret. You'll live, she mutters, which is encouraging, though you're not entirely convinced. The sauna's cooled. Someone's draped a goat pelt over your shoulders. It smells better than the fish, at least. A woman sharpens a knife against a whetstone, her motions slow and deliberate. Nearby, two boys argue over the last dried apple slice from winter storage each, pretending they were in tea. The healer squints at you, chewing on something suspiciously root-shaped. Some historians call this a perpetual stew. Others just call it Tuesday. Not for the buzz jest to keep from dehydrating. Clean water's a luxury, especially when half the streams upstream are being used for washing animal intestines. It smells like snow and seaweed and wood smoke, and, under it all, that ever-present perfume of fish. You shuffle into the light. The air is sharp and brisk. You can taste salt in the wind. You try not to imagine which part of the wolf. She hands it to you in a tiny horn cup, with the solemnity of a priest administering communion. Survival wasn't about fine dining, it was about calories, community, and occasionally tricking your taste buds into cooperation. For breakfast, you get gruel. Again, oats, water, maybe some goat milk, shouting at the troll until it ran back down, loudly. That's probably the Viking equivalent of a 5-star Yelp review. In public, she's feeding a goat some herbs, or maybe the goat's feeding on her herb stash. It's unclear who's in charge. There's weaving to do, boats to patch, gossip to whisper while pretending to stir the cauldron. You swear it winked at you. She motions for you to come closer. You chew slowly, watching steam rise from the wooden bowl like it's trying to escape. A sprinkle of dried berries gives the illusion of variety. And still, it's not bad. Warm, filling, the kind of food that tells your stomach, here, your major historical fact for the morning. Viking meals were often cooked in a large communal pot. You sip some mead watered down with lukewarm spring water. The blacksmith's hammer starts up clang, clang, pause, curse, repeat. Birds scatter from the thatched rooftops. You catch sight of the healer again? Apparently, it's time for your strengthening tonic. This one's made from fermented honey, crushed garlic, seaweed powder, and a whisper of wolf fat. It tastes like betrayal and old socks. But you smile anyway. By now, you've gathered. The Vikings weren't exactly picky eaters. Weird tidbit of the day? Some Viking folk believed hiccups were caused by a tiny invisible troll climbing up your throat. The remedy: you feel marginally better. Or maybe you're just getting used to the flavor of despair. Either way, you're upright. That's progress. The healer eyes you suspiciously, then nods once and walks away without a word. The rest of the village moves with quiet, measured rhythm. No one's in a rush. And through all of it, life hums along. Still sick. Still here. And the fish, still waiting for dinner. The sky doesn't care how you feel. It drapes itself over the village in a heavy blanket of gray, as if trying to smother the very idea of sunlight. Somewhere out there is the open sea. Somewhere out there is freedom. But you're still here, wrapped in goat fur. You're handed a thick wooden ladle and told, somewhat ominously, to stir clockwise only. Apparently stirring widdershins invites misfortune, or possibly summons a sea serpent. It's communal memory in a broth. And occasionally, someone adds a leek, a bone, a handful of herbsore. In the case of young Bjorn yesterday, smelling faintly of garlic and shame. The way your feet are always slightly damp, even when it hasn't rained. Today's challenge is soup duty. Not glamorous, but it beats being volunteered to clean fish guts by torchlight. If Edible had a cousin who never bathes, but means well. As you approach the stew pot, you brace yourself. A boy, barely old enough to grow a convincing beard, hauls in a basket filled with glassy-eyed fish, and glistening organs. He's beaming. Someone pats him on the back. You're pretty sure this is the highlight of his life so far. Fragrant, in the same way. Old boots are technically fragrant. You take a bite. It coats your tongue in a silky film that may never wash off. But you feel stronger. Or at least less likely to pass out. Your nostrils have permanently adopted the scent of brine and bone. And still, somehow, you're content. It's food. It's medicine. It's something to rub into sore joints when you've wrestled one too many sheep. She scoops several into a wooden basin and begins chanting softly, probably, though she could just be complaining about her back. It's been simmering for what might be years. No one really remembers what went into it originally. Some say rabbit. High in iodine and shockingly nutritious, seaweed helped keep goiters away. The answer, as with most things Viking, seems to be whichever didn't kill them. Which is great, because nothing ruins a perfectly good raiding party like unexpected neck swelling. Others claim it started as soup and evolved into a separate life form. You poke the surface. Something it may have been an onion or a toe. Despite its murky origins, the stew is important. It's shared by all. It's comfort food. Today's historical fact. Vikings regularly added kelp and seaweed to their dishes. You stir dutifully, clockwise, watching the steam rise in slow, lazy tendrils. Edible, kind of. You think about home, wherever that is. The quiet creak of the longhouse at night. The way the furs keep slipping off your shoulders. And just when the day starts to blur into a comfortable fog of monotony, someone yells. Loud, urgent, uncomfortably enthusiastic. Cod liver delivery. The village erupts into chaotic motion. This is a big deal. Cod liver is liquid gold. You rush over, mostly out of curiosity. The healer, as always, appears from nowhere. She plucks a liver from the pile and sniffs it, nods, approves. Now, here. A weird cultural tidbit. Some Viking communities believed that eating raw cod liver on the winter solstice would make you dream of your ancestor sand. Sometimes your ancestors would critique your fishing technique. You're handed a small bowl, warm cod liver stew, thick, oily. Historians still debate whether Vikings preferred their liver cooked, dried, or simply endured. The day wears on. You finish soup duty. Your ladle hand cramps. Evening arrives, wrapped in mist. You sit near the hearth, belly full of fishy resilience, eyelids heavy. Someone plays a lyre. Someone snores. You lean back against the logs, and the world exhales. Sleep doesn't come gently. It ambushes you mid-thought, like a wolf in tall grass. You don't dream so much as tumble through half-memories. A goat with human eyes. The stew whispering your name, A cod liver judging you silently from a wooden plate. You wake to rain. Not a storm, just a lazy drizzle soaking everything with quiet purpose. It patters on the longhouse roof. It's better dunked in broth. But then again, what isn't? The chickens, somehow always damp, cluck around your ankles. One pecks your boot like it owes her money. It runs down your cheeks as you step outside, blinking into another wool-colored morning. Breakfast today is barley hard, dry, the kind of thing you could use to shingle a roof in a pinch. You chew slowly, watching puddles form in the mud. And then comes the smell. Not stew. Not fish. Something ... worse. The healer is fermenting shark. Not even because anyone wants to eat it. Taste. She offers, holding out a piece that looks like cheese and smells like betrayal. Just because it's good for clearing out spiritual blockages, she says. A pleasant enough task, if you enjoy squinting at moss and arguing with bees. You find wild garlic, thyme, nettle. All staples in Viking kitchens and healing brews. You even spot a patch of Angelica prized medicinal plants said to fight off plague, fatigue, and boredom. You're not sure what that means, but the odor suggests something definitely got cleared out. When it returns, it brings a note that reads, "Why?" Then spend the next hour trying to scrape your tongue with a birch twig. You breathe it in and feel something settle in your chest. Not wellness exactly, but ... belonging. The bravery, presumably, came from surviving the experience. Here's your historical fact, or fermented shark, was a delicacy in Norse Greenland. The process involved burying the shark underground for months, then drying it for weeks. The result? A chewy, ammonia-rich bite that smells like a public bathhouse. Lost a bet. She catches your eye. You take the tiniest bite. Your soul leaves your body for several seconds. You thank her politely. Weird tidbit. Vikings believed certain foods could increase bravery. You're assigned to herb collection. You wander the damp forest, a satchel slung over your shoulder. Historians still debate how widely Angelica was used, or if its healing reputation was mostly folklore wrapped in good intentions. Probably. As the rain lightens, the world smells greener, earthier. You head back to the village. Satchel full, boots muddy, mind calmer than it's been in days. Dinner is simple tonight. Barley porridge with leeks. The shark is mercifully gone. You sit by the fire again? A child asks you if the stew can talk. You don't have the heart to say yes. Another day survived. Another meal swallowed. Another bizarre remedy endured. And somehow, you feel just a little stronger. The wind howls louder tonight, but not in a threatening way. More like it's practicing a lullaby in a language it forgot. Each time you wake, the world feels slower, heavier, as if even time has caught a chill and decided to take things easy. You lie under thick pelts, listening to the rhythmic creak of the longhouse beams. You climb the wooden ladder, careful not to slip. The loft smells sweet and sharp. Lavender, mugwort. It's hard to tell. Outside, the rain returns soft. Persistent, determined to soak every wooden cart, you drift in and out of sleep. When morning finally nudges you upright, you find a gift at your feet. A bowl of sour milk porridge. It's ... warmish. You eat it without question. That's the Viking way. Your chore today is surprisingly pleasant, helping dry herbs in the loft above the longhouse. The healer joins you, sorting stalks with practiced hands. The air up here feels thinner. Or maybe it's the dried mugwort playing tricks. She hums a tune older than the timber holding this place together. You eat with the others in silence, watching sparks drift from the hearth to the rafters. You've spent the day cradled in ritual, surrounded by plants with names like Bonebreaker and Dream Sifter. How bad can things be when you have a pouch full of moss that allegedly scares off spirits? You ask her what it means. She says, it's about a goat who stole a crown and became a king. The warmth of the fire below rises up, curling the air like lazy smoke. Time stretches. Here's your major historical fact. Viking Age healers were often women, and many doubled as spiritual guides, or practitioners of Sira, form of Norse sorcery, involving trance. In short, they were multitaskers with serious vibes. You hang herbs on twined lines, watching their shadows dance on the roof beams. 4 wounds, she says, then adds, and for dreams you want to forget. That second part feels less comforting. Weird tidbit of the day. Some Norse warriors would chew yarrow before battle, not just for pain relief but because they believed it helped them see. The last face they would ever see more clearly. Charming. You ask if she thinks the herbs really work. They work better when you believe they might. And even better if you sing to them. Historians still debate how much Norse medicine was practical science versus carefully decorated guesswork. Spoiler. Probably a bit of both. By midday, your fingers are green-stained, your nose filled with 1,000 conflicting scents, and your head just a little lighter than usual. You descend from the loft, feeling something akin to peace. Dinner is dried fish on rye, flatbread chewy, salty, defiantly bland, or pain, or the ever-mysterious stew. Just herbs, and shadows, and sleep. You wake 2 goats screaming. Not bleeding screaming. Like they've been told, taxes are being introduced. You stumble outside, still half wrapped in your pelt. Turns out, one of the goats found the healer's fermented onion stash and is now questioning its life choices behind the grain shed. You feel surprisingly good today. A little achy, but no fever. No dreams of talking fish. That counts as progress. Breakfast is oat cakes. You tear off pieces and dip them into sour berry jam, which someone insists and still claims to be cold. She's all elbows and muttering high praise. She slaps a bit of it onto your arm, uninvited. For learning, she says. You nod solemnly. That is indeed how you learn things now. She hands you a mortar and pestle without a word and starts sorting jars like a squirrel preparing for a particularly emotional winter. Today's assignment: help with salve making. You're paired with Torvi, the only villager who wears 3 scarves. The mixture begins to melt over the fire. It smells earthy, slightly minty, and a little like regret. Probably wise. You crush dried comfrey root while she measures beeswax with an intensity most people reserve for duels. But it smells like something that could... and just a little waxy. Mostly. Historical fact. The Vikings used salves made from animal fat mixed with herbs like plantain, comfrey, and thyme to treat wounds, burns, and chapped skin. Fat was the base. Herb was the hope. You stir slowly, watching the mixture thicken into a pale golden goo. Weird tidbit. Some Norse cures included singing into a wound to coax the pain out. There's no evidence this worked, but it definitely made for an awkward conversation starter. You bottle the salve into horn tubes, seal them with cork, and label each with charcoal symbols that may or may not say ointment or do not eat. She sniffs a jar, licks her finger, and declares, "Better than last year." You didn't know you were competing with last year, but you'll take the win. You scrub them in a wooden basin filled with pine needle water. By afternoon, your hands smell like herbs and wax, and possibly wet wolf. Someone suggests testing the salve on a pig with a sore leg. The pig declines by fleeing into the hills. Dinner is root vegetable stew, thick with turnip, onion, and a mysterious orange thing someone claims is carrot. You don't ask questions. You're learning. As night falls, you sit by the fire, gently massaging your temples with the salve you helped make. The long house quiets. Outside, the goat has forgiven the onions. And you, under wool and sky, drift, tired, healed. You wake to silence. Not the peaceful kind, more like the suspicious kind, the kind that means something has gone wrong. You sit up and glance around. The hearth is cold, the goats are not screaming, and the healer is gone. That last one is especially concerning. You rise, stretching slowly, your joints making the kind of crackling sounds that suggest your bones have been fermenting alongside the fish. As you shuffle to the doorway, the morning mist greets you like a cold cloth to the face. Today, the village is preparing for the sacrificial feast. This isn't your everyday stew and pray affair. This is big. Ritual big. Into it goes lamb fat, wild onions, dried seaweed, and a splash of mead. Outside, there's activity but not the usual sleepy routine. Here's your historical fact of the day. Vikings held to honor gods, spirits, and ancestors, often marking the change of seasons or important moments like harvests. Not the sacrifice part, that's reserved for people with stronger stomachs and less time to think, but the cooking part. It now smells like something your grandmother might call good for the lungs while forcing a spoonful down your throat. You choose not to ask. She nods at your broth, tastes it, and says, "Could use more ash." You nod back like that makes perfect sense. People gather in cloaks, their breath fogging in the chilly air. You watch the ceremonial offerings: bread, bones, a carved piece of cheese, and you sip carefully, the warmth curling through your chest. Torvi challenges you to a staring contest. You lose immediately. Specifically, you're on broth duty. Again. Or at least not cursing anyone, which seems like a more achievable goal. Either way, they work tiff. Not for the gods, then at least for morale. These feasts could include food offerings, animal sacrifice, and a great deal of drinking. You chew slowly, wishing the bread were less ambitious. You blink blearily into the soft morning light. The long house smells of extinguished fire, old leather, and someone's mead-soaked breath. You kneel beside a fallen log and find a cluster of fungi, white, frilly, suspiciously friendly looking. Torvi warned you. If it looks friendly, don't trust it. You leave it alone. You brush the dirt off and tuck them into your basket with something like pride. Still, you go through the motions. This is what healing looks like here: slow, manual, faintly pointless. She adds them to a thick stew with barley, dried beef, and a sprig of something that smells like licorice. The fly agaric, bright red with white spots, was known, feared, and possibly used in shamanic trance ceremonies. Not exactly your everyday soup ingredient. Probably yours. You're handed a task before you can protest, helping to prepare the sacred meal. Life returns to its rhythm, slow, rough-edged, surprisingly gentle. You consider telling the healer this, but worry it will lead to hunting thunderstorms. Broken wooden bowls, bits of charred bread, and a sticky smear of berry syrup mark the battlefield. You head to the cauldron, a familiar sight now, its surface trembling. As you stir, clockwise. Always clockwise. The healer returns eventually, carrying bundles of sacred herbs and something in a pouch that weird cultural tidbit. During some Vikings would smear blood from the sacrifice on their homes and tools as a blessing. Scholars disagree on how widespread this was, or how often it ruined a perfectly nice set of wooden spoons. The broth turns gray. The smell improves, oddly enough. In truth, you know very little, but off you go, a basket in hand, boots squelching through moss. The feast begins at dusk. A bonfire crackles in the center of the village. It's hearty, smoky, slightly crunchy, in a way that probably wasn't intended. Because that's what you do here. Historians still debate how much of the rituals were religious versus simply communal tradition. Later, someone passes around fermented berries soaked in honey mead. You lie back in the grass, full and slightly dizzy, listening to the fire crackle and the quiet hum of songs you don't know the words to. Tonight, your head throbs like it hosted a midnight battle between a goat and a drum. Outside, the feast is over, but the cleanup has only just begun. You're handed a broom made from bound pine branches. It does not sweep so much as rearrange the dirt into new locations. Breakfast is leftover bread soaked in last night's stew. It tastes like smoke, meat, and regret. Then, a new task. Mushroom foraging. Apparently, your brief stint in herb drying has given you a reputation for knowing the land. The forest is cool and damp, muffled like it's wrapped in wool. Here's your historical fact. Vikings used certain mushrooms both for healing and, occasionally. Eventually, you find what you came for. Chanterelles. Golden, curled, earth, weird tidbit. Some Viking-era communities believed mushrooms grew where lightning struck the ground. Back in the village, you clean the mushrooms with a damp cloth and patience. The healer watches with a nod. The stew is rich, savory, grounding, no herring. No surprise. Shark. Chunks. Just mushroom. Historians still debate how much Viking diets varied by season and region. But one thing is clear, they knew how to stretch ingredients with creativity and grit. The afternoon drifts by. You help hang smoked fish, stack firewood, and shoo a raven out of the grain bin. You sit by the hearth again that night, fire flickering low. Someone plays a bone flute. Someone else hums along. The air smells like smoke and mushrooms. You wrap yourself in a pelt and let your eyes close. You feel full of food, of quiet, of something like purpose. The village wakes with a groan today. Not from illness, not from weather, but from the unmistakable weight of chores no one wants to do. Which means ladders, thatch bundles, and a very real risk of falling into someone's soup. The sky glares. The goat beneath you looks judgmental. The smell of dried grass, the distant clang of someone dropping a pot. The soft hum of a lullaby from a nearby house, it all settles around you like a warm blanket. You're handed a woven rope belt and pointed toward the eastern longhouse. The one with a roof that's been sagging like a wet mitten for weeks. Once on top, you kneel in the damp straw and begin weaving new thatch into the old. It's surprisingly meditative. These layers were insulated with soil and grass, which occasionally sprouted wildflowers sore. Here's your historical fact. Viking longhouses had roofs made of turf, often built with overlapping birch bark for waterproofing. The rope bites your palms, but your mind drifts elsewhere. You tie another bundle in place. Evidence leans heavily toward the latter. Below, the healer walks past, carrying a tray of boiled roots and something that may or may not be part of a reindeer. You eat near the fire, the warmth sinking deep into your tired muscles. You both agree to pretend it doesn't until spring. That feels like the Viking way. She doesn't look up. She doesn't have to. She knows you're up there, contemplating gravity. You can't help but smile. It's a good start. The healer needs it for sealing wounds and warding off the dumb spirit. She doesn't elaborate, which somehow makes it worse. The healer calls it morning strength. You call it surprisingly delicious. A hot drink made from birch sap, mint, and something the healer only calls courage drops. You drink it in one go. It tastes like minty tree bark. It's man. Whether this was spiritual or simply a romantic excuse for night walks is, as you can imagine. You scrape sap into a leather pouch using a bone blade, watching it glisten like amber. Sticky fingers. You hum a little as you work. That last one helped clean teeth, freshen breath, and possibly silence nosy relatives. And crushed marigold petals, and stirs with the kind of focus usually reserved for hexes or bread baking, which, in Viking terms, is basically a promotion. She dabs on pine salve, sings softly, and ties a scrap of wool around the leg. You feel something warm unfold in your chest. In practice, it was often both because, when your best tools are fish, moss, and hope, you learn to blur the lines. The mixture is poured into small clay pots. She labels them with runes scratched into bone chips. Lunch today is eaten on the roof a wedge of barley cake, a smear of curdled cheese, and dried apples. You chew thoughtfully while watching a bird try and fail to land gracefully on the smoke vent. You eat in silence, the firelight flickering on clay bowls and tired hands. Weird tidbit. Some Norse households believed that birds nesting in your roof beams were a sign of good luck unless, in which case, someone in the house was about to owe a god a favor. The sky darkens early. You climb down just as the drizzle begins. Your knees crack like old floorboards. Historians still debate how medicinal drinks were dosed, whether precise measurements were followed, or if it was more of a pinch of this, splash of that, and a prayer situation. Dinner is simple: toina roasted carrots, dried venison, and a barley mash that tastes slightly of last week's smoke. Torvi sits beside you, grumbling about the roof still leaking. The flames crackle. The wind settles. and beneath the repaired roof, you sleep, dry, exhausted, and only a little itchy from the straw. Today begins with laughter deep, bellyful, contagious. Someone has accidentally worn their tunic inside out, and now the entire village treats them like a wayward jester. Breakfast is goat milk, warmed with cinnamon bark and a pinch of crushed nuts. You're sent to the forest again, this time not for herbs or mushrooms, but for resin. Pine sap, specifically. You walk under tall trees, the air damp and resinous. Historical fact for the day. Pine resin was widely used in Viking medicine as antiseptic, adhesive, and even chewing gum. A squirrel throws a pine cone at your head. You consider it an initiation. Back in the village, the healer melts the resin over coals. Adds ash, weird tidbit. Some Viking Age healers believed that applying salve under moonlight increased its strength. You help carry the salves to the supply hut, passing the blacksmith, sharpening a curved blade while humming something suspiciously like a lullaby. Lunch is flatbread with dried herring and juniper paste. It tastes like salt, citrus, and regret. You eat all of it. You're learning. In the afternoon, you watch the healer tend to a child's scraped knee. The healer looks at you sideways and mutters, "You're not bad at this." Historians still debate the extent to which Norse healing was rooted in observation versus superstition. That night, dinner is lentil and leek stew vegetarian, accidentally. Someone forgot to defrost the salted pork. No one complains. Outside, the forest hums. Inside, the salve cools. And under the soft weight of your own breath, you sleep again scented faintly of pine. There's frost on the ground this morning. Not enough to crunch beneath your boots, but just enough to nip at your cheeks like a disapproving ant. The kind who smells like pickled herring and judges your posture. You bundle into your cloak and step outside. The air smells of wood smoke, damp moss, and something faintly sweet. You follow your nose and find it. The baker's hut, where someone is attempting honey cakes. She says it's chest season, when everyone suddenly remembers they have lungs and start complaining about them.
You're handed one?
It's dense, slightly burnt, and somehow still sticky in the middle. Hot drinks weren't just comfort, they were strategy. You eat it in 2 bites. It tastes like a memory of cake, passed down 3 generations and filtered through ambition. You love it. Today, the healer wants your help preparing for winter illness. Each goes into a pouch tied with twine, labeled in charcoal scribble. Others just have a tiny fish drawn on them. You don't ask. That's the closest thing to optimism she's offered in weeks. The scent is warm, grassy, almost lemony. You sip. It tastes like old sun and quiet strength. You can see why the healer loves it. Your task. Make herbal infusions, soft and steaming, designed to coax out phlegm. The answer is probably yes. People, thank you. Some slip you berries. One gives you a carved button shaped like a pig. You don't know why. You accept it anyway. So, always ask your tea permission before you brew it. Here's your historical fact. Vikings brewed teas from herbs like thyme, elderflower, nettle, and angelica to treat colds and respiratory infections. You feel the same. Your dreams were strange last night. Something about a stew that spoke in riddles and asked for payment in turnips. The healer's hut is filled with rows of split cod, glistening and grimacing. The smell is intense. As always equal parts, the healer throws you a rag and a slice of sour bread. Don't eat with that hand, she advises. You take it to heart. It's a dark, hot, creaky place that smells like every meal ever cooked in it. It's not exciting, but it goes down easy and doesn't look at you first. You hang the fish, close the door, and leave it to become future food. Stockfish, a dried cod, was a staple-ite, durable, and lasting for months. It was the granola bar of the north. You start with dried elderflower, pouring hot water over the pale blossoms and letting them steep. You grind willow bark into powder, mix it with warm water and crushed nettle, and wrap it in a wool scrap. The patient doesn't scream. Victory. Weird tidbit. In some Norse tales, elder trees were thought to house spirits, especially Huldrefo, mischievous forest beings who would curse anyone who cut the tree without permission. You just know it works better than chewing on sadness. You mix other blends, chamomile and mint, sage and yarrow, dried berries with a hint of ash bark. By mid-afternoon, your hands are stained green. Your sleeves smell like thyme. You've become a walking brew yourself. The healer nods. If the village doesn't cough itself inside out this winter, we'll thank the nettles. It keeps the fish respectful, he says. You believe him. Mostly because the fish does seem unusually still. Lunch is a hot drink and leftover lentil mash, reheated with garlic and wild onions. It tastes far better than it has any right to. Later, you carry the finished tea pouches to each house. Historians still debate whether Viking medical knowledge was passed down through formal apprenticeships. Yell at a goat while brewing tea. That night, you sip a steaming blend of nettle and mint by the fire, and as you listen to the wind rattle the shutters, you feel grateful for every leaf, root, and accidental cure that got you through another day. The sun rises reluctantly, dragging itself over the treetops, like it had too much mead and not enough motivation. Today begins with fish. Not for breakfast, thankfully, but for preservation. You're handed a knife and shown how to scrape, clean, and salt the fish for winter storage. It's messy work, but rhythmic. Historical fact. Vikings preserved fish using salting. You work alongside a man named Jarden, who insists on humming dirges Your sleeves get soaked. Your knife hand cramps. Weird tidbit. In some Norse households, the smell of rotting fish was believed to ward off evil spirits. Historians suspect this was mostly a convenient excuse. After hours of salting and stacking, you help carry the racks of drying cod to the smoking shed. Lunch is cold barley mash with a sliver of cured pork. Later, the healer lets you help with a poultice for someone's swollen ankle. Historians still debate how often painkillers like willow bark were used medicinally. The evening is quiet. The stew simmers gently. You hear laughter through the walls. You sit by the fire, watching flames curl like slow thoughts. You smell like fish. But you feel like someone who's beginning to understand the strange language of healing. And when sleep comes, it arrives without asking. Just settles in beside you like it's always belonged. The longhouse groans with the cold. Not the sharp kind, but the deep kind. The kind that seeps into the wood. Somewhere nearby, a spoon has frozen to someone's hand. The healer meets you at the door with a grim smile and a frozen bucket. "Time to render fat," she says, as if announcing a birthday party. Again. The fat melts down with a rich, heavy scent. That's equal parts comfort and challenge. Torvi pops in to remind you not to look directly into the pot. If it blinks, walk away. You don't ask. You're bundled into every woolen layer available, looking more sheep than person. But for lighting, waterproofing, and occasionally rubbing onto exposed skin to survive icy winds. Think lotion meets survivalist barbecue. Rendering fat is exactly as glamorous as it sounds. Like patience, chunks of animal, tallow beef, pork, even sealar chopped, melted slowly over fire. You stare at it for longer than you meant to. The room seems to soften around it. The result? Clean, semi-liquid gold, used in cooking, healing, candle making. The cold waits just outside, but inside, it's warm enough to dream. Here's your historical fact. Vikings rendered fat into smyre and fichu. Both essential not just for survival. It was hospitality in its most unsettling form. You stir the pot slowly. Not a blizzard, not a flurry, just a steady, whispering fall that coats the longhouse roof. You step outside and everything is hushed, as if the world pressed a finger to its lips. You take a moment to sit in the open air, the wind biting your cheeks like a reminder that nature is, or garlic. It changes depending on her mood. Congratulations. The bread softens. It tastes like every warm meal you've ever needed. Long simmered, often overnight. It was used as both food and medicine, especially for the weak, the wounded, and the very tired. She doesn't say what it protects against. You decide to wear it anyway. Inside, warm milk, barley, and honey. Perfect. Like someone ladled up the concept of peace. Either way, It feels good to have something small and purposeful in your pocket. The healer adds a pinch of rosemary to one, a smear of ash to another. You nod. You don't entirely know what that means, but it sounds like something you're ready for. For smell, she mutters, and protection, and maybe the mice will hate it. The longhouse is full of soft noises, snoring, slurping, someone whispering a story to a half-asleep dog. They go into a massive pot with water, herbs, root vegetables, and what looks suspiciously like yesterday's porridge. You stir slowly. The broth darkens with each hour, the air filling with a savory fog. She takes 3 full scoops, slurps loudly, and declares it almost edible. You take it as a compliment. Weird tidbit. Some Norse folk believed that burning fat on specific nights, especially if the fat came from animals you de-raised yourself. You strain the hot liquid into clay pots, trying not to spill or burn yourself. After hours of work, your hands are greasy, your face flushed, and your boots suspiciously sticky. Lunch is bread fried in rendered pork fat, topped with pickled cabbage. It tastes like winter survival. In the afternoon, the healer hands you a candle made from today's tallow. Still soft. It burns slow, she says. You light it at dusk. The flame is low and golden. The smell is earthy, faintly sweet. Historians still debate whether the calming effects of firelight in Viking homes were intentional. You fall asleep that night with the candle still glowing beside you. It flickers. Snow arrives in the night. You walk carefully, boots crunching over powder. The healer stands near the fire pit, cradling a steaming bowl. She hands it to you without a word. Today, she says, is bone broth day. A good one, she claims, for clearing out the old, for rebuilding strength. You begin with the bone steer cow, for some fresh, some aged. Historical fact. Bone broth was a staple in Viking cuisine, prized for its nutrients, flavor, and versatility. Torvi wanders over with a bowl and asks if she can test the flavor. Weird tidbit. Viking warriors believed broth made from bones of wild animals passed on their strength. It wasn't just nourishment, it was transformation. As the broth simmers, the healer makes you stack wood again. She says, warmth is half the medicine. The other half is broth, or sleep. Lunch is a bowl of the broth, finally ready, poured hot. In the quiet of the afternoon, the healer teaches you how to make a healing amulet, just twine, bone, and a few dried herbs wrapped tightly in leather. Historians still debate whether these talismans had specific meanings or were simply gestures of comfort and superstition. The snow thickens as the sky fades. The fire crackles low. You curl up near the wall, a bowl of broth in your hands, steam fogging your eyelashes, and for once, your body doesn't ache. Your breath is steady. You drift, heavy, grounded, warm, as if made of bone, broth, and memory. You wake before the sun, not because anything is wrong, but because the quiet is just too perfect. You wrap yourself in your cloak, rise slowly, and step outside. Smoke rises in slow ribbons from chimneys, curling into the pale gray sky. You exhale, and your breath ghosts out ahead of you like a spirit on a walk. It's the kind of stillness that only snow can bring, a padded, echoless hush that makes you feel like the world is holding its breath. The long house is dark, the fire little more than glowing embers. The village is blanketed in snow. Not a footprint in sight. Roofs sag under the white weight. Today, the healer says, is for rest. Past the tree where someone hung a charm against sore throats. Along the creek that now runs sluggish beneath a thin crust of ice. For reflection. You've earned it. The stew simmers. Even the goat that ate a pouch of thyme and now believes it's immortal. A fire burns low in the center. The healer hands you a warm stone to hold. For the hands, she says, and the heart. Beams creaking gently like old friends shifting in their sleep. Just the soft rhythm of resting wood, resting bones, resting time. The fire, now quiet. You're sent to the edge of the forest, not for chores this time, but for something softer. Take the air, she says. Let your bones remember the world, so you walk. Through snow that squeaks beneath your boots. Maybe even a ghost of cod liver, though you've made peace with that. Here's your final historical fact. Winter and Viking life wasn't just about surviving the cold. It was about storing strength, slowing down, healing, feasting. Yes, but also storytelling. A.J. Hopsnear pecks the snow and ignores you entirely. It was a time to become human again, not just a worker of the land. You sit on a log and sip hot elderflower tea from a horn cup. That's practically a badge of honor. Weird tidbit. Some Norse folk believed that the first snowfall of the year contained whispers from the god Sif. You might hear advice, warnings, or a really specific recipe for elk sausage. You think about the first day you arrived here. The soup, the cod liver, the strange sleep-talking stew, and somehow you've made it through. Warrior of tea leaves and turnip. Not gracefully, not always willingly, but you're still here. You return to the longhouse as dusk begins to fall. You sit. Someone strums a lyre. Someone else hums a song without words. The shadows flicker. And as the flame dances low, your eyelids do the same. So now you lie there, beneath wool and woven stories. Your breath soft, your thoughts slower than the snow outside. The long house breathes with you. You feel the day retreating, like waves pulling slowly back into the sea. The smells around you are familiar now. Pine, smoke. You remember the herbs hanging above, the strange remedies, the half-believed charms, the hands you worked beside in the cold, the voice that hummed while mixing salve and stories. And now, your own breath falls into that rhythm. Slow, steady. You learned. You may have smelled strange most of the time, but in the Viking world. So rest now. Let the night carry you, as gently as a snowflake falling on fur. And if the stew talks again tonight, tell it you're off duty. Sleep well. You wake to the sound of sandals slapping lazily against stone, someone shuffling past with a basket of lemons balanced on their head. The scent still clings to your skin. Warm spice, rose, and a hint. Whispers of Babylon, remember? You follow the street, more wandering than walking, through archways, carved with lions and columns that whisper conquest. The city is quiet now, caught between the golden hush of late afternoon and the deep indigo of night. Somewhere ahead, a camel snorts. Both seem equally unimpressed with history. You pass a group of scribes sitting cross-legged beside a shallow pool. A blend of citrus peel and ground coriander, cut with something vaguely medicinal. You're near the royal apothecary now. They're dipping thin reeds into ink made from soot and pomegranate skin. Scratching orders onto clay tablets. One glances up at you and mutters something in Old Persian. You don't speak it, but the tone is unmistakable. Look at this overdressed tourist. You smile politely. They roll their eyes politely. A cultural exchange. As you round a corner, the scent hits you again, this time, sharper. This is where perfume becomes politics. One record mentions a perfumed pigeon sent to a rebel general. Their ankles flash silver in the light as they crush rows after rows, releasing oil into a waiting trough. They don't speak to you. They don't need to. The pigeon did not survive the flight, but it smelled absolutely divine. No note, just the scent. Days later, he pledged loyalty to the king. One girl splashes your boot with rose water. She grins. You nod. A sleepy diplomat. Some think it was coded language. Others say the satrap simply owed the king money and got nervous. Either way, the oil worked. You realize this is how courts scent. Was made not by magicians or kings, but by tired feet. Might be too. Did the oil symbolize protection? Power? Power. The flames lick low, releasing scented smoke, frankincense, and something mossy. A courtier beside you, in robes embroidered with peacocks, is explaining how scent can signal allegiance in ways. Words. In the Persian court, gifting scent wasn't just a friendly gesture. It was encoded diplomacy. The city breathes like a dozing beast snoring gently under its own weight. A vial of sacred kifi, or an incense brick pressed with the king's seal, might serve as a reward. Ambassadors would leave the court carrying presents that functioned more like perfume-laced ultimatums. Scent could indicate favor or control. A famous example. Historians still puzzle over an incident where a satrap in Egypt was sent a tiny flask of cedar oil wrapped in linen. A guard passes below, dragging his spear tip lazily against the stone. Young nobles, too rich to sleep, are daring each other to wear peasant scent. One dares to rub his wrist with garlic. Another shrieks and nearly falls off the parapet. You watch him fade into the shadows, a human boundary line. No one agrees. Scholars remain divided. Traders bearing lapis ivory and rare incense from India. You imagine their carts creaking under fragrant bundles. You imagine the sleepy camels, annoyed at being poetic metaphors. Weirdest part, the stars tonight are so sharp they almost hum. The Big Dipper hangs just over the distant Zagros Mountains, scooping quiet from the sky. Court ceremonies often began with anointing rituals, where nobles would be dabbed with sacred oil not for hygiene, but to spiritually deodorize before addressing the king. The courtier beside you is snoring now, his peacock robe fluttering gently in the wind like it, too, is dreaming of better politics. You stop at a shaded courtyard, where young girls are treading petals in a shallow basin. If a household suddenly stopped wearing the king's favored blend, it could be a red flag. Too much pine resin. Treason. Too much cinnamon. Overcompensating. Too much patchouli. Probably just a teenager. You hear the slow drip of rose oil into clay bottles, and your modern perfume, still based on these formulas. Perfume, it turns out, isn't just ancient, it's eternal. Especially when it comes to controlling rooms without raising your voice. You sit on the basin's low edge. In the distance, a cypress tree sways like it's nodding off mid-conversation. The sun is almost gone. Night in Persepolis is not quiet. It's soft. Yes, but not silent. The chirp of crickets competes with the low thrum of wind through cedar rafters. Somewhere, a lyre strums a hesitant lullaby, half-tuned and wholly tired. You're on a palace rooftop now, seated beside a brazier. You nod like you understand. He explains that in times of tension, say, when a noble house was suspected of plotting rebellion day'd. The courtier chuckles, then fans the brazier. Sparks dance. He leans in. There was a man, he whispers, who tried to smuggle a message to the Greeks inside a cake of perfumed soap. He nods. They caught it when the royal nose declared the soap too poetic. Sometimes subtlety smells suspicious. The breeze shifts. You catch a whiff of something bitter like crushed bay leaf and regret. A new sound joins the night. Laughter from a nearby rooftop. Royal rebellion. You let your gaze drift upward. Beneath it, somewhere in the dark, caravans are moving. Down in the garden, the cypress tree you passed earlier is now just a silhouette. Another fun fact. The Persians believed that perfume purified not just the body. Scholars still aren't sure. But one thing's clear. In this world, it's fate. You stretch your legs out, toward the fading brazier. You lean back, you close your eyes, and somewhere, a pigeon smells just a little too dramatic. Morning drips in, slowly, like thick honey, down the side of a silver bowl. You wake to the sound of sweeping soft bristles dragging dust into neat, ceremonial piles. The palace courtyard is being refreshed, not cleaned, really just. You sit up on your borrowed cushion and breathe in the new day. Saffron smoke, dew-damp stone, and the ghost of last night's cedar fire. Now it's pink, marble, and bright linen, metal clinking softly from the wrists of noble women. A scent dances in the air, freshly distilled rose oil, carried in tiny flasks tied to the belts of the king's bodyguards. The city has already changed clothes. Gone are the dreamy blues and sleepy golds. The guards let you pass not because they trust you, but because you smell like you belong. You're practically dripping in upper-class sandalwood. Yes, the bodyguards. The floor mosaics are cool beneath your feet. A cat walks by like it owns the empire. It probably does. You wander toward the hall of audience, ducking beneath banners stitched with winged bulls and stylized stars. He nods, barely. The noble bows so low he nearly tips into his own bribe. Inside, light filters down in long, sleepy beams. At the far end, a noble stands nervously before a dais, presenting a gift to the royal steward. A silver urn wrapped in velvet and dripping. But it works. It always has. Because here in ancient Persia, if words are politics, then perfume is poetry with consequences. You smell it before you see it: cardamom, benzoin, maybe honey. He's offering perfume, of course. A suitor once drenched an entire chariot in lilac water, then parked it outside a princess's chambers. She declined his offer, but reportedly enjoyed the smell. The horses were confused for days, but not just any perfume. A bribe disguised as a token of admiration. They'd send rare oils to courtiers they favored, hoping to curry influence. A slice of paradise, arranged not for survival, but for peace. The word we use, teda paradis, comes from the old Persian word paridesa. The smell is crisp leaves, dew, and crushed herbs underfoot. You step carefully. A gardener glares at your sandals. Others used scent too. Shame like the time. A minor lord sent spoiled jasmine oil, implying his presence had grown rancid. This happened often. Later, it'll be tucked into storage boxers, into sleeves, into the folds of dowry cloth. Scented cloth was a subtle social tool, a sign of wealth, refinement, and in some cases, marital eligibility. You've just been spoiled by roses in politics lately. Not religiously, necessarily more like a daily spiritual dusting. A foul scent could mark a liar, a thief, or a demon. It's unclear whether the inverse was true, if good perfume could redeem a bad reputation, but Some nobles, definitely. A reminder that even the gods like things that smell nice. Some nobles, too cautious to speak treason aloud, would use scent to speak on their behalf. Perfumed insults. What a concept. The oddest tactic. Back in the hall, the steward sniffs the urn. Somewhere behind you, a flute plays something circular and slow. A court scribe nearby leans toward you and murmurs, "Too much musk." You both pretend not to laugh. There's something surreal about this world, where scent can earn you a title or exile you to the edge. You step back outside, eyes squinting against the rising sun. A breeze picks up. It smells like sweet resin and high-stakes compromise. You're not sure who's winning, but they smell fantastic. You take the long way down through the gardens. They say Cyrus the Great was the first to imagine a garden as more than just food or function. He wanted order. Harmony. You're walking through one now. And yes, it feels like heaven got tired of being dramatic and decided to nap under a pomegranate tree. Water channels cut neat lines through the soil, reflecting blue sky and green cypress in slow. At a stone bench, two elderly women are laying strips of linen. They gesture for you to smell. The linen has been soaked in vinegar and herbs, then set here to dry in the sun. The women laugh when they realized you didn't know that. They hand you a sprig of mint and wave you off. Down the path, a young boy runs past with a goat on a leash. At the center of the garden stands a small pavilion, where a priest is burning a blend of juniper and storax resin on a low altar. One fun tidbit. Ancient Zoroastrians believed that bad smells were associated with corruption and evil. There's a recorded case where a merchant accused of cheating was allowed to atone by funding a public rosewater fountain. Well, the next record shows he was later trampled by an ox. So ... unclear. You close your eyes. You inhale crushed fig, warm stone, and the faintest trail of sandalwood. It smells like status. It smells like survival. It smells like a story still being written in oils, one drop. You wake to these. Not the aggressive, angry kind, but the lazy, sun-drunk kind buzzing softly around a flowering vine that crept across your fig tree shade like it owns the place. The garden hums in golden morning stillness. You're still under the fig tree, but now someone's left a dish of dates and a folded piece of perfumed linen beside you. You're approaching the royal stables. Kindness, hospitality, mild confusion over what exactly you are and whether you live here now. You chew a date. It's sweet, almost fermented. You smell the cloth orange peel and clove. A subtle blend. Someone clever made this. You stand, stretch, and begin wandering again, winding through rows of cypress and pomegranate. Royal processions were full sensory experiences, and a pungent horse could ruin the whole vibe. A well-scented horse was a statement. Strength, control. Plus, let's be honest, it's harder to plot treason if your horse smells like heaven. There is a report of a cavalry unit being sent back to the outskirts of Susa. That might sound dramatic. That's because it was. The idea was to make soldiers feel closer to home, to sanctify battle space, and possibly to mask the smell of nervous sweat and existential dread. Yes, even the horses wear perfume. In the distance, the walls of Persepolis shimmer under the noon sun, like they're floating. Okay, technically, it's the saddle. But still. He snorts at you, unimpressed. A groom nearby pats his neck and mutters, he prefers frankincense. You blink. The horse snorts again. Like, obviously. Inventories were kept on clay tablets, marked with wedge-shaped cuneiform, so precise it could account for the number of myrrh seeds imported last spring. Stable hands are busy rubbing down the mounts with cloths soaked in vinegar and oils, designed to both clean and impress. You linger near a long-haired stallion with eyes like molten gold. Back in the day, elite Persians believed animals, like people, could carry and reflect aura. You watch as the grooms braid ribbons into the horse's manes, blue for loyalty, red for honor. One ribbon flutters loose and catches on your sandal. Jars line the walls, hundreds of them, sealed with wax and stamped with tiny lions. Each scent, a locked-in whisper. Each jar, a bottle of power. You keep it. Just a little trophy from the world's most fragrant cavalry. And now a weird cultural tidbit. Persians often perfumed their military tents. Imagine marching into battle and thinking, ah, yes, bergamot. The Persians knew that memory had a scent. That grief, too, could be bottled. Pillars rise like petrified trees, casting patterned shade over low couches and bronze bowls, full of roasted nuts. A young noblewoman nearby notices and nods. Someone pours wine into carved alabaster cups. It smells sharp and floral. You continue walking as the air grows still. A hawk circles above. That means someone very important is coming. His robe, embroidered with images of lions fighting griffins. His smell, devastating. The man turns to you and says, "You smell like Barzi's work." You follow a narrow road leading away from the stables, past the training fields, and onto the edge of the palace grounds. Now it's dry earth, cumin, and a whisper of camphor. Less glamorous, but equally political. Every drop of perfume used in court, from the king's robe to the priestess' altar, had to come through here. One particularly obsessive record lists how much rosewater each noble was allotted per week. Someone received 8 measures. Someone else, only 5. It comes out as a wheeze. Tensions were. Some say it was never real to begin with, just a fragrance invented by poets and pushed by hopeful lovers. Someone tells a story about a courtship gone wrong due to an unfortunate blend of garlic and rose. Laughter ripples. Historians still argue whether these limits reflected status, discipline. It's been a long day, full of strange power and invisible languages. You imagine it approving. You slip past a distracted scribe and peer into the storeroom. It was said she wore it not just to attract admiration, but to make herself unforgettable. One noble once claimed he dreamed in that scent for weeks after seeing her. Another fainted outright. Everyone dabs their necks. You follow suit? It smells like crushed pine and morning. Not everything about perfume is romance and royalty. Some scents were worn for funerals, for losses, for rituals of letting go. You put the jar back gently. Outside, the wind picks up again, carrying dust and distant flute music. You walk back slowly, the ribbon still in your pocket, the scent of pine still clinging to your hands. The shadows are long again. Evening folds over Persepolis like a silk shawl, soft, deliberate, and stitched with secret meanings. You're at the edge of the inner court now, where the elite dine beneath open skies. This is a place for power, dressed as leisure. You blend in, sort of. Your sandals are dusty, but you're still scented like someone important. You nod back, trying not to look like you just woke up in a bush 3 hours ago. A servant approaches carrying a small bronze censer. It smokes, gently fumes, rising in elegant twists, ambergris and cinnamon bark. You barely have time to prepare your face before he arrives. Tall, bearded, with kohl-lined eyes and rings on every visible joint. You realize, to your quiet horror, you're seated near the head of the gathering. You nod. He still insists on cedar bass notes. Predictable? Dinner continues. People speak softly, mostly in compliments. You sip your wine. It tastes like sleep. Then, an older woman begins telling the tale of the Queen's favorite Senta blend, honey and crushed juniper. Historians still debate whether the Queen actually wore that perfume, or whether the scent became legend after her death. Either way, the blend was banned from court after she died. You breathe in. You breathe in. An imitation. A ghost of a ghost. The meal ends with quiet music and a final round of perfumed cloves. You stand to leave, swaying slightly. As you walk back through the garden, the moon catches the scent rising from your clothes. Somewhere far behind you, the man with the griffin robe is still talking. But the wind has other plans. Tonight, the stars feel closer. They crowd above you like curious birds, blinking slowly in the violet-black sky as if they, too, are trying to make sense of this perfumed empire. You're lying on a woven mat on a palace rooftop, still wrapped in the memory of spiced wine and sandalwood. The city, like you, has decided to lie very still and let the smells do the thinking. Below, Persepolis murmurs. Just a hush now. You watch smoke rise from a brazier nearby, soft spirals of burned fig wood and dried sage leaves. This is not for warmth. This is tradition. Even sleep in ancient Persia is scented. It's cool, faintly minty, with a touch of rose and almond. For dreams, he whispers, as if dreams might be shy and need encouragement. A servant approaches, barefoot and almost apologetic, holding a small jar. He dabs something behind your ears with a practiced hand. One day, Alexander will ride through this same city, setting fire to its splendor, likely while wearing someone else's cologne. Whether that actually worked is up for debate, but it does explain why noble bedding often smelled better than their politics. But for now, none of that has happened yet. For now, it's just you and the stars and the almond-scented promise of a dream. You close your eyes. The scent does something strange. It makes the past feel heavier, closer. And suddenly you remember, this empire is not eternal. You know because you've read the end of the story. And now, a strange historical nugget. Some Persian nobles reportedly slept on pillows, but to keep nightmares away. You're in the palace's public court, and around you, dozens of people are milling about. Something is happening. You can almost hear the coins clink as merchants secure their scented goods for the next caravan. A bottle of iris oil here. A bar of pressed soap there. Somewhere, a satrap dreams of power. Down in the city, the wind stirs the silence. Giant bowls of herbs are being tossed onto fire pits. It's a kind of olfactory a whisper of identity. One young boy has rubbed himself entirely in wild thyme. There are reports that for this festival, you had to register your scent in advance to avoid confusion or outright olfactory chaos. Some scents are so strong they make your eyes water. Others are so faint they feel like a ghost brushing your cheek. Too many people trying to smell like cinnamon. Someone ends up in a ditch. Another woman drips with something bitter and exotic, perhaps. Imported oud. Their garments are soaked in rosewater, which releases into the air with every twirl. The scent rises in waves, warm, floral, familiar. You spot the ribbon, tied into a dancer's braid. The air swirls with cloves, bay leaves, coriander seeds, and something that smells suspiciously like optimism. Children dart between dancers, trailing streamers soaked in orange blossom water. You dream of bees. A truth wrapped in scent. Sleep takes you like warm river water, slow and certain. Then maybe, by the way, we smelled once on a wind-stirred morning like this. And in your dream, the perfume speaks. Section 10. She tells you it's meant to balance ambition. You nod slowly. She nods slower. You're not sure what just happened. You wake in a different scent. Entirely. This one is sharp acrid. Wood smoke and citrus peel. It takes you a moment to realize you're no longer on the rooftop.
Ah, yes.
The festival of fragrance. Of course. You squint through the haze. Everyone here smells different, but purposefully so. This day, once a year, everyone in Persepolis chooses a scent. Scent as self-expression. It sounds modern. But here it's ancient, codified, celebrated. You drift between booths where vendors shout half-heartedly under garlands of dried rosebuds. You sample a little here, a little there. One man claims his perfume is made with the tears of lions. You decide not to ask. A woman invites you to try her blend. You do. It smells like pine needles and crushed stone, cool and grounded. Nearby, a group of musicians begins a droning chant, and dancers take the square. Remember the cloth you carried earlier? The one scented with orange and clove. Someone else is wearing it today. You smile. For all its politics and pageantry, today feels human. Underneath the empires and economics, behind the courtiers' careful smiles and strategic dabs of vetiver, that we all, in some way, want to be remembered. And if not by our words or deeds, you inhale deeply. The festival spins on, and you melt into it, one more scented shadow among many. The wind is warm tonight. It drifts lazily through the narrow streets of Persepolis, soft as the breath of a sleeping cat. Sand and jasmine coil through the air like a half-forgotten lullaby. Somewhere nearby, a copper oil lamp flickers behind carved lattice windows, sending sleepy shadows down the alley walls. You follow the scent, not smoke, but something sweeter. Something expensive. You're in the heart of the Achaemenid Empire. Sometime around 500 BCE maybe. Dates in ancient Persia blur, like watercolor left out in the rain. Historians still debate whether Darius had already built the grand audience halls, or if they were still sketches on the backs of palace ledgers. But tonight, none of that matters. You're not here for politics, not directly. Behind it, an old woman with blue-dyed fingertips is grinding something with a stone pestle. You're too busy wondering what a spy smells like. Probably like you smell myrrh, rosewater, maybe a drop of lion's blood. No, too expensive for market day. But the smell is rich, cloying, royal. He's wearing a robe, embroidered with tiny cedar trees. You assume it means something. Everything does in this place. You're here to smell things. Perfume. Real perfume. The air is rich with scent and silence. Everything here moves slowly, like honey in winter. He stops in front of one, cracks the seal, and waves the lid under your face. The smell hits you slowly. Smoky, woody, almost like sun-baked temple stone. It's not exactly pleasant, but it does make you feel taller. Trusted scent tasters who would stand near courtiers and report on their ... aroma status. If you were ripe with proper musk, congratulations. If not, well, you might find yourself reassigned to goat inspection in Bactria. Not the stuff in glass bottles behind department store counters. This is ancient, hand-ground, secret recipe stuff. The kind you wear not just to impress but to rule. The air, thick with perfume, hums like a memory you can't quite place. You see, in this world, perfume is more than a scent. The right one, a promise of loyalty, a declaration of power, a subtle seduction of the entire throne room. Scent was speech just a little stickier. Everything from the way a beard was curled to the exact note of scent worn could make or break your day. Sometimes, literally. Rumor had it Xerxes once demoted a courtier for smelling like donkey oil instead of saffron. A weapon. A whisper that lingers in the robes of kings and the hallways of power. You step past a silk-draped vendor stall. She doesn't look up, but her voice hums low. You want to smell like a satrap or like a spy. You don't answer. Shadows stretch like lazy cats. You hear a flute, off-key, but determined. The scent of incense drifts in from the ziggurat nearby. You probably won't make it through this day. He lets you sniff. It smells like crushed violets and something metallic. He calls it Whispers of Babylon. You don't ask questions. That's okay. You're not really meant to. This journey is slow and drowsy and so very ancient. Before we go further, breathe in, and while you're at it, go ahead and gently press that subscribe button. It doesn't bite. Tell us in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the empire. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. You walk into the perfumer's courtyard, past narrow irrigation channels and drooping date palms. The man who owns the shop Barzai, or so the wall carving, implies greets you with an expression somewhere between curiosity and a hangover. Royal noses, he says, motioning you in, are very sensitive. Hello there, tired traveler? Welcome to this quiet corner of history. Before we go back in time to explore the freezing winters of the Middle Ages, I just want to say how happy I am that you're here. A time when snow and ice didn't just make life difficult. Back then, winter could mean life or death. Maybe you're lying in bed, getting ready to fall asleep. The sun is low in the sky and gives off very little warmth. Frost covers the ground, and a light snow is starting to fall. The reason for this change is still not fully clear. In London, the River Thames turned into a frozen street. One of them was Isaac Newton. He was a student at Cambridge University when the frost came. He had to leave school and return home to his family's farm. The wealthy had warm clothes, large piles of firewood, and full pantries. But poor peasants and farmers, who made up most of the population, had a much harder life. While sitting by the fire with nothing else to do, he started thinking deeply. That's when he began to work on some of his most famous ideas, like calculus and optics. Every hour of every day was spent trying to stay alive. Still, even in this hard life, people found little moments of happiness and hope. People walked on the ice, built little shops, and even lit fires right there on the frozen river. But also traditions, even family and friends, meant everything. Families gather around their fires, telling stories and sharing whatever little food they have. There's a feeling of togetherness, of helping each other through the cold. Held on December 26th. On that day, the strict rules of society were turned upside down. Poor worker, maybe a servant, or a farmer would be chosen to be the lord of misrule. That person got to lead a wild celebration, full of music. It was one day of joy in a season of hardship. Festivals and joy. Even in deep winter, there were small lights to look forward to. But they're also strong. They've survived many winters. And they believe they'll survive this one too. It looked amazing, but it was deadly. Many people died in their homes that year from the bitter cold, but its effects were felt everywhere. Crops died, animals froze, and the wind blew colder than ever before. Smoke from the fire fills the air. You can see your breath in front of you. Your bed is just a bundle of straw. Your whole family is curled up around you, trying to stay warm. Cold air sneaks in through every hole in the wall. Your fingers and toes are numb and painful. Winter is coming. And for people in those days, winter meant one thing. Or maybe you're just looking to relax and listen to a peaceful story from the past. Either way, thank you for joining me tonight. It's heavy work, and your hands are quickly dry and cracked from the cold. But you have to keep going. Without firewood, your family won't make it through the night. You think of your children, cold, hungry, and small, and you carry on. If you'd like, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're re-listening from and what time it is for you. It's always lovely to hear from people all over the world who enjoy history. The food from last autumn's harvest is running low. You know the coming weeks will only get harder. Out in the barn, your animals shiver. Frost clings to their fur. They huddle together to stay warm, their breath steaming in the cold air. And if you like calm, quiet stories like this, you can subscribe so you don't miss the next one. But for now, let us forget about the busy modern world and go back to a time when winter was not just cold, it was dangerous. Snow would soon cover the land, and ponds and rivers would freeze solid. But it wasn't always this way. Long ago, winter was more gentle. People expected it and accepted it. Then something changed. The weather began to shift. This period lasted from the 1300s all the way to the 1800s. Winters became longer and harsher. One of the coldest winters in history happened in 1709. That year, the temperature dropped so low. Still, even in times like that, some people used the cold in surprising ways. It makes you wonder how many great ideas were born because of a long, quiet winter. But for most people, winter wasn't a time for thinking. It was a time to survive. Imagine waking up in a small, cold cottage. If you're lucky, breakfast might be a bowl of porridge or a bit of old bread. Later in the day, you go out into the snow to gather firewood. This was everyday life for many people in medieval times. You see, people back then lived closely with nature. They noticed the changes in seasons, and each season brought not just problems. One of those lights was the Feast of Sin. But perhaps the strongest symbol of hope in the medieval winter was the act of simply being together. When life was this difficult, picture a small village covered in snow. Smoke rises from chimneys. It's a sign that people are alive inside. In the houses, neighbors visit each other through the snow. One brings firewood. Another brings a pot of soup. Everyone looks tired. The long medieval winter was not just a passing season. It was a way of life. Cold, slow, and difficult. Every day brought new problems, and every problem took time and energy to solve. The days were short. The nights were long. People lived with little, but they carried on, quietly and carefully. Let's look at what daily life in winter really meant for ordinary people during these times. In small villages, life moved slowly. Most people lived in tiny wooden or mud houses. The walls were thin. The wind would blow through gaps in the wood or stone. There were no glass windows, just wooden shutters. The floors were made of dirt, and straw was often laid down to keep out the chill. Chickens, goats, or even a cow might stay in the corner of the room, helping to share body heat. It was rough and filled with bits of chaff or grit. Sometimes it was so hard that it had to be soaked in soup or ale before eating. If the harvest had been poor the year before, then meals got smaller each week. If there were holes, straw was packed inside to keep feet warm. Mittens, if they existed, were made of rough wool. Cold fingers and toes were common. So were chilblains, painful red bumps caused by freezing temperatures. People had to stretch their food and make it last. There were stories of whole villages where people survived on nothing but broth and bread crusts. The rivers were cold and sometimes completely frozen. If water was needed, someone had to break the ice. A roasted animal or a pot of soup might be shared among villagers. Bread would be handed out. Knowing that your neighbor might share firewood or bring food if you fell ill made the cold more bearable. Churches were often one of the warmest buildings. thanks to thick stone walls and big fires. Villagers gathered there not just for worship, but also for warmth, news, and support. They shared what little they had, and through these quiet, careful acts of kindness, they found a way to make it through. It taught patience, endurance, and the deep value of community. Religious festivals during winter, like Christmas or Candlemas, were chances to forget hunger and celebrate for a day or two. The snow would melt, the rivers would flow again, and the cycle of the seasons would continue. These acts of charity helped people survive, and also built trust in the community. Carrying buckets of water became part of the daily routine. Many went weeks or even months without washing. They believed that cold water might cause illness, so people stayed wrapped up and avoided getting wet. In London, during the coldest years of the Little Ice Age, the River Thames became a place for fun. People set up stalls on the ice, selling food or warm drinks. Jugglers and musicians came to perform. There were even games and small rides. It was dangerous. The ice could crack, but it gave people joy in the darkest part of the year. There were no doctors in most villages. Instead, people relied on herbal remedies or simple treatments passed down from older generations. Some believed in charms or prayers to ward off sickness. Old legends, folk tales, or simple bedtime stories helped pass the time. Some families sang songs or said prayers together. Others carved small tools or fixed clothing. Winter was hard, but it gave people time to be close, to talk, to remember. It sounds strange now, but it made perfect sense in a world without heating. Inside, the house was dark and smoky. Most homes had only one small fireplace. That fire wasn't tea, just for warmth. It was also where food was cooked, and sometimes even where people dried clothes or warmed stones for their beds. The chimney, if there was one, didn't work very well. Smoke would fill the room, making people cough, but they still sat close to the fire. It was the only place that gave any comfort. Everyone stayed close together. Families shared beds or sleeping mats. Sometimes they even brought animals inside to sleep. Outside, the land was frozen. Snow covered the ground. Food was always a concern. The harvest was done in the autumn, and whatever was stored had to last through the winter. There were no fridges, no supermarkets, just cellars, clay pots, and cold barns to keep things fresh. Root vegetables, like turnips, onions, and carrots. They were buried in the ground or kept in storage holes. Dried beans, salted meat, and pickled vegetables also helped people survive. Bread was a big part of the diet. Heavy, dark, and often made from rye. For many, hunger was normal in the winter. Children grew up learning that winter meant sacrifice. They wore clothes made from old wool or patched fabric. Boots were handed down from older siblings. Bathing was rare. Water had to be carried from a stream or well and then heated over the fire. In winter, this task became harder. Illness was a serious threat in winter. Colds, fevers, and infections spread easily in cramped, and yet life went on. People found ways to cope. They told stories by the fire. In some places, winter fairs were held. When the rivers froze solid. Meanwhile, in the countryside, some landowners and local leaders organized small gatherings for the poor. Despite the hardship, winter brought moments of connection. People needed one another, not just for help, but for comfort. Even the church played a part in holding communities together. In the face of so much cold, people created their own kind of warmth, not just with fire. They looked out for each other. The medieval winter may have been brutal, but it was also a season that brought people closer. And as the days slowly began to grow longer, and the first signs of spring appeared, people looked ahead with hope. The rooster crows. You wake on a lumpy straw mattress in a dim, smoky one-room hut. The fire has burned low. The air smells of damp wool, wood smoke, and something slightly unpleasant. And to get grain, you need land, good harvests, and the Lord's permission. You might rent a strip of land in a long field, growing barley or rye. Your diet revolves around simple, repetitive foods: bread, porridge, and cabbage. In the morning, you might heat up yesterday's pottage, a thick, dull stew of barley, lentils, and any greens you found growing wild. Onions, if you have them, are chopped and boiled. Everything is boiled. Seasonings are rare. Salt is precious. Pepper is a luxury. If you're lucky, you might grow garlic or herbs. But mostly, you eat to not be hungry, not for pleasure. Wheat is for the rich, or for holy days. If last year's harvest was poor, you're probably already eating your seed stock. In the Middle Ages, hunger is your familiar morning companion. Surviving means starting the day by thinking, what do I have? What did I gather? What can I trade? What can I scavenge, forage, or hope for? If you do have meat, it might be salted pork. So salty, it has to be soaked in water to even chew it. Fish is more common. Herring, when available, is dried. Fridays are fish only by church decree. Today, like every day, you must figure out how to feed yourself and your family. In a small village, you don't have many options. Bread is life, if you can bake it. But first, you must have flour. There is no fridge, no cupboard, no store down the road. Let's say you're an average peasant, not starving, not wealthy. You don't eat much meat. Meat is for feast days, or for those who poach rabbits and risk the stocks. Cabbage is boiled. Turnips are boiled.